So let me introduce our panelists. So Bridget, for those of you who don't know, Bridget is the Managing Director, Asia Pacific for Qualtrics, an SAP company. As head of Qualtrics, head of the Qualtrics business in ANZ, Bridget is focused on driving customer and partner success, business growth, and leading the creation of the experience management category. With a track record of accelerating sales performance across multiple industries, Bridget's passionate about the impact of differentiated customer, employee, product, and brand experiences. I actually almost don't think there's anyone better that we could have today, given the topic that we're talking about around customer experience. So it's going to be really interesting to get your feedback as we go. And I might, when I kick off the questions in a moment, I might kick off with you if that's okay. Now, Carmen, to my left, who I've known for many years from our SAP days, I'm so happy to have Carmen on the panel today. And I think Carmen's contribution is going to be fascinating, but also probably surprising to a lot of you. Carmen is the Global Vice President of Customer Engagement for an organization called With You, With Me, helping customers transform the way they use data-led solutions to build productive teams from overlooked talent pools, including veterans, neurodivergent, Indigenous, and women in technology. As one of Australia's fastest growing tech companies, With You, With Me exists to create a more equitable world, helping to create meaningful careers, workforces, and organizations through human asset creation. As aspirational goals go, that's pretty much top of the list. So welcome, Carmen. Thanks so much for being here. And then last but by no means least, Alex Opacek. You probably wouldn't be surprised to learn that Alex has an athlete background, and it wouldn't be that hard to probably guess the sport either, but I'll allow you to do that. I won't tell you. Along his journey, Alex has met many other athletes who've learned to transfer their high-performing habits from the world of sport, to the world of business. So, from the court to the boardroom, as it were. And this is how his business, Athlete to Business, was born. He connects ex-pro athletes who are high-performing business professionals with companies that can utilize their unique skills and experiences. He also helps athletes transition into a post-sport career by coaching them on how to utilize their skills and experience from sport to gain a competitive advantage in the business world. I'm chuffed that Alex is here today as well, because with both Carmen and Alex, what that gives us is two distinct pools of candidates that most of us probably haven't been looking in. And this is, I think, a really critical conversation. We can't just fish where the old fish have been forever. We've actually got to find new ponds, and I don't know, I might be butchering the analogy, but we've got to find a way to find different people and bring them in. There's something that Carmen and her organization talks about a lot, which I think is really important. It's not about just focusing on past experience. It's about focusing on future potential. So I think that's a really, really important thing for us all to be aware of. Okay, so let me, if I can, let me throw to Bridget first, as I kind of kick this off. When we debriefed ahead of today's session, there's a couple of things that came out that I found really interesting. You're an organization that is completely focused on experience for your customers and helping people with their staff as well. Can you just talk a little bit about the experience for Qualtrics team members and how you make yourself the sort of organization that people actually want to work in and want to come to? Can you just maybe at a high level share a little bit about that to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. And firstly, thank you for joining online and here in our office in Sydney. This is our Asia Pacific Japan headquarters as well as our Australian HQ. And one of the reasons I was so keen to invite you all in is because this is part of the experience, right, in terms of how our employees come into work every day. So we do a lot of research around customer experience, employee experience, product experience, and brand experience to help us and to help our customers. So if anyone's interested, we've just released the latest employee experience report, which is going to be part of what I'll be talking about today. So when we look at the research, the things that we need to do, because we're a hyper growth organization, we're hiring, we'll be 5 times larger in 3 years than we are today. We've hired 70 people already this year. So what's really important when you're attracting talent is you're actually retaining the talent as well. So we use our own platform to continuously listen and continuously have dialogue with our employees to understand what will make them stay. There's no point doing an exit interview. That's a lagging indicator. We want to know what's going to keep people engaged. And it's consistent with the research that we've just released. The things that will keep people in an organisation is if they believe their career opportunities will exist. So that is helpful for us, because when you're growing at 5 times, you can kind of pick your path. I think when I looked at it last year, we have 43 different types of jobs that we didn't have the year before.
Wow.
So not are we only hiring so many people, I think 250 last year in this region, but 43 of those, the roles which didn't exist before. So if we can get our leaders working with their people around what do you want to do? And Dr. Cecilia Herbert is here. She's an organizational psychologist. She works with our customers in thought leadership on how to do this, but so I'm actually going to have her as a secret panel member. So the second thing is, do I belong? So there's remnants of our Q Pride party that we had for One Denison. For those online, we're in a 33-story building, and we had a block party, and we invited Microsoft, SAP, Channel 9 and Red Hat and whoever's in the building. Microsoft and SAP sponsored it. And our Q Pride, or Qualtrics Pride team, put that on. And that's an example of our Q communities, where people who are passionate about their community, they stand up these groups. And so everybody, that's our opportunity to help people feel like they belong. The third thing is people need to be connected to what they believe the future outcomes of the organisation are. So we try and tap into that. We use OKRs every quarter where we have our company big bets for the year. And every team member is encouraged, well, not encouraged, is the leader works with them to work out what are the couple of things they're going to do to attach to at least one of those big bets. And that's to help people feel connected to the outcomes of the organisation, and also to surface obstacles that we can help them get through. So I think that, those things are really important. And interestingly enough, in the research, pay was number 23 in that list. But it's very different. We're here to talk about the sales profession. 44% of tech people in tech are likely to change roles this year. And in Australia, 40% of people are likely to change roles this year. So that's why I started with the retention piece. And then the attraction piece. And we surface the things that are going to keep people engaged and wanting to go back into the office as well.
There's some fascinating stats there. The fact that pay is so far down the pecking order, but also the fact that so many people potentially are going to be moving this year. And I think, that's scary for a lot of employers, because I had a chat with a sales manager recently who said, could you help me understand what we need to be doing to compete beyond just the package and the OTE, because we literally don't know, and we don't know where to go to find that out. So, Cian, I know you know some recruiters. Could you ask them what other? So, there's a lot of employers out there that it's not that they don't want to do it; it's just that they don't necessarily know what they should be doing. So, we'll probably come back and dig into that topic a little bit more. Hey, Carmen, can I come to you if I could? And I probably butchered the explanation of with me. So maybe let's start there. If you could just, for everyone, just kind of give them that overview of what the organization is, and then I might hit you with a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Perfect, sure. Okay, so with me, generally we say it's all about helping underrepresented and underemployed groups find work, and that doesn't really generally mean a lot to people. So I wanted to give you a quick example of what I'm talking about. So there's a guy called Tom who was a combat officer in the military for 9 years. He did 2 tours in Afghanistan, and he ended up being medically discharged a little while ago. Now, he applied for hundreds of jobs based in Sydney, and couldn't get one. He even applied to be to work in security at Commonwealth Bank, and they wouldn't even accept him for security at Commonwealth Bank. And if you look at the skills that he's got, or what he gained in the army, he has if you look at the skills they gain in the army, it's a lot around resilience. It's a lot around problem solving on the fly. It's a lot about teaming and leading teams and motivating teams. If you think about what those teams are doing, and really bringing those teams together. But it's also the ability to focus and run at a task quickly and move on to the next task. And if you look at those skills, they're eminently valuable in today's world. And so him applying to be a security guard is really what we mean about being underemployed, right? So that's not using the skills that he actually has. And when we talk about the fact that he couldn't even get that job, basically meant that he's sort of underrepresented because he literally just couldn't work at all. He is the CEO of our company. So he's taken a company that's 5 years old. And in a year, we went from 50 people, we're now just over 500. So it just wanted to give you an example of what it means to actually look past experience and look at what the future potential is within people. And we see the same thing with the neurodiverse and with the women in tech, with refugees as well.
So can I dig into that a little bit? If, let's say, Colin, who we both know, whose son is neurodiverse, when they come to you, what do you do? What's the process you go through? And then how do you kind of bridge that gap from you to helping them find a role? And how does that work a little bit?
Yeah, great question. So basically we have a data-led process that we look at to understand what skills somebody has and what aptitudes they have, and also what attitudes they have. So firstly, looking at their skills, and it's things like how do we identify, are they good at problem solving? Are they good at spatial awareness? And we map those skill sets to the future of work, the digital roles that exist within the industry that people are looking for at the moment. So we map those skill sets to those roles, and then we provide training for those candidates to get to that entry level, and we do that all for free. So that's part of what we do. Our CEO is very big on the fact that we would never charge anybody to understand what skills they've got or to get their first role within industry. So we do all of that when we get them up to speed, and then we spend a lot of time helping them understand the environment they're going into and helping the environment understand who they're getting and the value that they bring outside of ticking that diversity box. So, for example, I've got guys I work with where before we go and I do any presentations to the CEO, we get him to run through the presentation, and he will look at a problem from every single direction, and he will ask all the questions. And by the time we get to the CEO, we've already got the answers for all the questions we know he's going to ask, and it always works out that way. So it's understanding the skills they can bring to a team situation as opposed to an individual as well. So we're really focused on that team and how we start building teams that can run at problems together.
I just love it. And it's so just different to any approach that I've ever heard before. So I'll come back. There's a couple more follow-up questions. But before I do that, let me come to you, Alex. Before we talk about what you do with the athletes that you work with, can you just maybe give us a little run through of your career from, starting in basketball and then transitioning out and into business, and I suppose what that was like, but also some of the challenges that you experienced along the way?
For sure. No, thanks for having me on as well, and thank you all for coming along. Yeah, as you probably all would have guessed, I used to play basketball, given the height. So yeah, so I guess it ties into kind of what I do as well, but a little bit about my story. So I started playing elite level basketball around 17, 18 at the AIS in Canberra. Played with the likes of Paddy Mills, Joe Ingles, Aaron Baines, who some of you guys might know, are in the NBA and the Boomers. I went on and played college basketball in the US. After that, for 4 years, played against Steph Curry, who some of you might know as well as a legend of the NBA already. And then after I graduated, I played professionally in Europe for a couple of years across Croatia, Macedonia, Cyprus, and Greece, which was an amazing time. But so Croatia was my last stop. But after that, I had it wasn't a horrific, but a knee injury, which actually took me out of the game for a couple of years. I ended up having 3 knee surgeries. I was 25 at the time, and I never made a ridiculous amount of money or anything like that where I could just retire or focus on rehabbing my knee. So my career came to a halt. I was absolutely clueless in what to do next. Had no idea where to go, how to go about it, what my skill sets were. I think I was afraid to turn to somebody for help as well. I wasn't comfortable with being vulnerable. I didn't want to come off as being weak. So I just kind of locked myself in a room for a couple of years, really had no idea what to do. I bounced around different jobs. Wasn't a great time, but eventually I guess my back was up against the wall. I landed on my feet. I was lucky enough. I was playing semi-professional basketball, so still needed a full-time job. I was approached by a sales manager for a company called Southern Cross Stereo. It's probably not a big media company. And she said to me, we have an account manager job that's entry level available at the moment if you want it. And I was like, what's an account manager? Is this accounting? I'm clueless in finance. So she explained to me it's actually sales. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's all about building relationships. And she said to me, you have a mongrel in you that I see that I think would translate really, really well into sales. And I'm willing to get it out of you. And I think I can get it out of you. Give me 6 months, you'll be extraordinary. I'm like, sure, let's give it a go. So I interviewed, got the role, and honestly, 6 months later, I was an absolute superstar in sales. She helped me translate those high performing habits from sport into sales, and my whole world just turned around. I just started really, really enjoying sales. So long story short, I ended up being promoted into the head office. I was working in a town called Albury Wodonga, if anyone knows, in country town. Got promoted into the head office in Sydney, and just built a really good career for myself as a business development manager in sales, in media. And along my journey, I noticed a lot of other athletes who were working in sales were very successful, high performers, exceeding targets. A couple of my sales managers were also athletes as well. But I also noticed a lot of athletes struggle with that transition out of sport, not sure where to go. So I had a light bulb idea to start a business that helps these athletes transition into sales, because I'm strongly passionate about their habits and routines and traits that transfer into sales quite well, and connect them with organizations who value that elite athlete mindset, essentially.
Can I just ask you, when those athletes come to you and you see maybe what that sales manager saw in you, that mongrel or that something, that spark of potential, how do you know, and what do you do to kind of assess whether they're just good at whatever sport they do, or whether they have the capacity to make that transition? How do you go through
that's a great question. I gut feel and just trust in the person, but I can see, they have the competitive, the resilient, the discipline, they want to make it. But in terms of can they actually make it in sales, we do have an internal check system that we use. So check is an acronym for CHEC. It stands for communication skills, humble confidence, emotional intelligence, and commercial awareness. And we score people 4 out of 5. If they score 4 and above out of 5 and all 4, we'll put them through to our clients. So I think if you got somebody who's highly driven, resilient, has that athlete mindset that I speak about, along with ticking the box in that check system, highly unlikely that they won't make it in sales. So I can never 100% guarantee.
No, of course.
But I think, if that.
I mean, it's just fascinating, because again, as with Carmen, that's, a talent pool that I imagine many of us have never even occurred to us. I mean, yes, sometimes you come across someone, but there hasn't been a mechanism to proactively find a group of those people. So I think that's really interesting. Bridget, can I come back to you for a second and kind of go a little bit deeper on one of the topics we were speaking about earlier on? You talk about experience, and we spoke with Dr. Cecilia a few moments ago about this as well. Different people want different experiences. Different belonging means different things to different people. How do we go beyond that kind of surface level box ticking? These are the things that we offer to people. Come and join us, to recognize and then provide options for different people. I think that's something that many organizations really, really struggle with. They want to do the right thing, but they just don't know how to. So I'm just interested, how Qualtrics does it, but also how you advise other organizations in that respect.
Yeah, I'll hand my mic to Cecilia in a second. Yeah. I like when people say to me, what does Qualtrics do? I say we turn rumors into facts, and we help organizations act with precision and confidence that what they're going to do next is the right thing. Now, that relates to brand and product and customer, but for this conversation, it relates to employees. You can hit and hope and think you know what your employees want, but I tell you that how an employee feels today in the Sydney office may be very different by 4 o'clock, depending upon what's happened with COVID, or maybe I just saw some lightning outside. So, with the storms that have been here. So it's that continuous dialogue with the employees. And so that's part of the platform that we bring, is that we're consistently listening, but also taking action. You can listen all you want. If your employees don't see you move the dial and making meaningful progress on the things that matter, then they'll be looking elsewhere, because you're not. The worst thing you can do is ask and not
take action. Can I just before we throw to Dr. Cecilia, so it sounds like the feedback loop has to be shortened from the quarterly catch-up that we often used to have to more iterative, more regular.
Totally. COVID taught us a lot of things. And if you're an organization that believes in a biannual survey with your employees, COVID taught you how useless that is. So, we're very much about constant dialogue, not just listening, but the dialogue with the employees to make sure we're calibrating and at least understanding their perception.
Yep. You can take my mic. Okay.
And hi, everyone. Great to meet you all. I think this really taps into the concepts around culture as well. And I think a lot of people, we've used the term culture fit for a long time. And at Qualtrics, we've made a big adjustment in starting to think about culture add. And that's a really important mindset shift, because you're not trying to hire people who are the same as the other people that you already have. You're trying to hire people who are unique and different and bring something that they add to your culture, which is maybe something that you haven't got already. So this concept of someone who comes from a sporting background or comes from a military background, sure, they may not have followed this perfect linear pathway of every other, high flying and high performing sales executive that but that means that they've taken an alternative path. They've got different life experiences. And that actually makes them a candidate that is of exceptionally high value, not someone that you have to think, oh gosh, we have to train or we have to accommodate or we have to invest in their development, because actually they're going to bring completely new perspectives into your organization. They're going to be able to connect with your customers. They're going to be able to build a culture that's quite unique for you. And so these things that they have aren't throwaway items. They're actually things that they bring. And I think one thing to think about when you're attracting talent and you're retaining talent is that culture piece, because people will look at a job description or a job profile, and most people can find a way to, transfer their skills from what they currently have to the way that they could fulfill that job criteria. A lot of people can, look at your job ads and look at your job descriptions and see that connection. But for them to apply and for them to accept an offer and for them to join your company, perform well and stay, it comes down to their ability to thrive within that culture. And so there's been some really, really robust psychological studies out there that have shown that if you're looking at a job description and you look at the language in that job description and you think to yourself, I don't think I'm going to be able to be myself. I don't think that they're going to fully utilize all the skills that I actually have. I don't feel like I'm going to thrive in that environment. And it just doesn't sound like a place that I want to be. That's not an environment that I feel comfortable putting myself in. They don't want to be there and they don't want to apply. And that's why it's the little things in your culture and in your language and your events that you invite people to where people think, man, I really want to work there. Like, I don't even care what I do. Like, I just want to be part of that culture. Yeah. And, I used to work at Google and I used to do the work there. And I remember when I applied for that job, and the same thing here, I actually didn't care that much about the particulars of the role. I just wanted to work with those people and in that culture. And a lot of people have that as well. So if you're not consciously thinking about what kind of an environment or what kind of a message are we sending to people about what it's like to experience physically being here in this workspace with these people, is it going to be this cutthroat boys club locker room thing where people are like, oh, I don't really want to be part of that? Or is it going to be an inclusive, nurturing environment where I feel like I can be myself and I will thrive? They're the ones that will attract the best talent, irrespective of all the skills and all of the matching that you do. That's the thing that will attract them and retain them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cecilia. That's great. I just wanted to dig into that, and I actually wanted to come to you, Carmen, if I could. That concept of kind of culture add versus culture fit. I can imagine for many of your team who are moving into roles that's a big fear for them. How am I going to fit in? How do you coach the organization before you even think about the individual in terms of how to create the right environment for them to thrive and to feel comfortable?
It's a really good question. I think there's a couple of things here. Is that what I would say is that team culture can override company culture, so that you also need to understand the culture of the team that person is going into. Because you can have a great company culture, but you can have a team that just doesn't work well together, and that's the thing that will depict what you do next. So the couple of things that we do is when we start working with any customer, we benchmark their team culture. So what is the culture that we are looking at bringing these candidates into? And most of the time we find they don't actually even really understand what their team culture truly is. So we do a lot of work with that. So then we can have a look at the candidates that we're looking at and look at how they sit within, and not necessarily, to your point, not to fit them to the culture, but what are they going to add to that culture? And we kind of take it as a more of a data-led approach. So we look at things like, are they creative? Are they really the workhorse doers? And are you trying to put a creative person into a role that's really a whole lot of tasks around getting stuff done? And what is that going to do to that person?
Yep.
And that goes a lot to the retention side of keeping people as well, right? When you look at people and sort of go, well, you're a sales and we're going to have, everybody should be the same. Well, actually, they're not the same. And I think if you get a workhorse or what we call a doer, a green shirt, and you say to them, we're going to do a day of brainstorming, they're probably likely to call in sick, right? It's not their bag. However, taking that brainstorming and turning into action is really where they sit. So it's making sure they understand who they've got. Yeah.
Yes, Bill. Yeah. So the question, John, it's okay. Yeah, the question is, how do you benchmark culture? Which is a great question.
Very good question. So we look at a couple of things. So we look at the DISC profiles. So we go through and look at DISC as a way of understanding the team personalities, the team makeup, and then we also look at I was just talking through the archetypes of, what does that team makeup look like already? And if you have a team that's already creative heavy, you don't want to put another creative in there because you're going to make that creative try and do tasks that don't sit with them. And that's generally where you start to see a retention issue because it doesn't feel comfortable for them. So it's trying to make sure we understand what they have to bring and then what that team is needing as well. So, and making sure that team understands how to use what they've got, because quite often they don't look at it from that perspective either of what have I got in my team and how do I put them in the right place to do some of these tasks. And to go back to the example of my autistic friend Desi, who can look at a problem from all angles, he's great to have in a sales team. As a salesperson, no, but he's great in a sales team because he brings so much to that team. So looking at a culture from a teaming perspective is really, really important.
Thank you. Yeah. And I might just throw it to, because I saw you grab the mic, so I guess.
Sorry. So measuring culture is, what organizational psychologists do. So like there's an entire industry out there of people who can support you with thought leadership and guidance around this. But when I think about culture and benchmarking culture, to define what culture is, it's your values in action. It is the way that your company values are showing up in your team norms. And what I mean by team norms are the habits and the behaviors of the individuals that you work with. So these are things that are observable, they're measurable, and they're benchmarkable as well. So at Qualtrics, we've got a model which we call EX25, which stands for Employee Experience, 25 signals. And so what you've got are your key performance indicators. These are your employee outcomes like engagement, retention, well-being, people's expectations being met in their roles. And that's what you're aiming for when it comes to a healthy team culture, is that you want to optimize that, but not just as an average, but you want to optimize it for everyone. So you want to be looking into your employee segments at your team level and at your diversity to understand who's experiencing what in terms of those outcomes. But then your culture really sits in what drives those outcomes. So these are things, the respect in the workplace, people's role fit, whether people believe that feedback is listened to and actioned. And we've developed a model of 25 signals that are indicators or actions that you can take which drive those employee outcomes. And that's a really good starting place for understanding culture. But then the one thing that we always work with clients on is how to customize this for you and for your organization, which is where the values come in. So for us, we've got our tacos, which are our core values as an organization, and we measure those, and we measure whether people are showing up every day and they're demonstrating and actioning our values. And we check and we ask people how they're experiencing that. So there's a way to measure your culture, but first is you've got to define what you want your culture to be, and then know where you are, and then know what actions you need to take to get there.
That's great. Thank you. And it's really interesting because it feels like it's less putting the onus on the individual as we used to do to say you need to fit, and more putting the onus on the organization to say we need to accommodate and fit more people. Alex, can I ask you, and this is, I don't know, it just occurred to me, if I'm a high performing athlete and then I go into a sales role, there's an assumption that I'm going into an organization that focuses on high performance, and, you know, because sales, we want people to succeed. That isn't always the case. Do you have high performing athletes going in and looking around and saying, why aren't people working harder? Why aren't they doing more? Why aren't they, you know, does that happen?
It's a good question. Not so much. If so, they might not be honest, and, you know, they might not come out and say it. Like the biggest thing that I've seen in terms of culture, that I think in that instance, a lot of athletes would be high performers. They're just going to go on about be high performers if the others are not. I guess a good team player would try and get the others to come along on their level as well. Like I've heard feedback that's happened where the athlete was a culture value add, and it's kind of brought everybody else to be on that level, and that raises the intensity. The bigger question that athletes have that I've seen is there's a lack of feedback in the corporate space, like a lack of, you'd have maybe your weekly, your monthly sales catch up, sometimes quarterly. Like that's literally the only time you get feedback. In sport, and that's the biggest thing that I actually struggled with when I transitioned into the corporate world. In sport, you know, as you know, in basketball or footy or whatnot, you have timeouts every couple of minutes. It's feedback. But when there's a stoppage in the play, the team will all come together and we're like, right, what happened there? Let's do this. It's constant feedback all the time, and it's honest. Like, look, you're just not playing good at the moment. Lift it up. And that doesn't happen in a sales environment. So that's been actually the biggest adjustments I've seen athletes have to make. And I think we're actually just trying to change that and be honest. Just say, go up to your sales manager and say, look, tell me the truth. How am I doing? And yeah, so that's the constant feedback loop is missing, and something that I think I'm trying to change.
I mean, that's fascinating. One of the things that we do is get feedback from customers as to the performance of salespeople, and salespeople love that. It's great because they never get that normally. So the ability to hear candid, unvarnished feedback from your customers about what worked well and where you've got some room for improvement, it gives you that honest feedback loop that you're talking about. So I've got one more question, and then, which is going to be kind of a question for the panel, and then I'm going to throw to the room, and hopefully we'll get some questions and comments. We're hearing more and more about Gen Z. Obviously, we come through all the generations. I don't know what happens after Z. Do we go back to A? I'm really not sure. It's quite a scary concept. But before we get to the next iteration, and Carmen, I might come to you on this. Like, what are the expectations? How do we not just recruit different people, but give them what they need in an organization, particularly small and medium-sized companies? Because for the large organizations that are really focused on this, as Qualtrics and SAP and some of the, we can take some global activities, but for other organizations, they feel like they're getting left behind because they want to do stuff, but they don't know what to do, and then they don't have access to the research necessarily, and so they just kind of make it up as they go along. What are you seeing in the research that's coming out from you guys around Gen Z and their expectations?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we have a team of org psychs that do a lot of research for us around this space. And they're just about to release some research. And it's interesting because they're not showing up the same as our millennials. They're quite different, and they're almost starting to show up a little bit more like baby boomers. And the reason I say that is because you think about what they've been through in their formative years. They went through the GFC with their parents. There was a lot of job losses. We had COVID, and there was a big disruption in the status quo again. Now we've got the war going on in Afghanistan that's starting to affect here in terms of prices going up and all the rest of it. So for them, they require a higher level of certainty. So they're not looking to job hop. They're looking for that job safety within an organization. They're also looking for weekly feedback. That they want weekly feedback. They want that hybrid model, but they want to talk to people in person. They're not big on texting and all the rest of it. They want face-to-face feedback, and they want it all the time. So quite a different situation to what we would potentially set up for millennials and what they're looking for. Interestingly enough, one of the pieces of research that came out was that their social media affects them greatly, obviously. But if you think about it, their parents didn't understand privacy. And if you think about it, their whole life has been documented on social media. So they're very, very private. All of their Instagram accounts are private because they've grown up as a digital native without control of their digital footprint. And so they're really quite a different view of how they look at social media and privacy. So.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And evolving all the time, I think, which is interesting as well. What about from your perspective, Bridget? So for that next Gen Z generation?
Yeah, so we have a big presence in universities. It's actually the DNA of where we came from, is to do our original product was to do research in tertiary institutions. So we have a huge footprint in universities, which is a great kind of feeder into our talent. And I agree with you, they want certainty. And it's interesting. You can say to one generation, the world's your oyster here. What do you want to do? Career path, your ways, take your journey, whereas for them it's like a planned matrix options of snakes and ladders, and what that might look like is really important, and helping them deal with the ambiguity in the world through structure. And so but it's very important to us, because there is a conveyor belt of talent if we do this right, that we will have people here that will progress their careers. I describe it here like a tree, right? You come into Qualtrics in the trunk, whatever that discipline is, and you can keep going up the trunk, or you can go out on a branch or go out on a twig even and come back. So but leaving it vague like that doesn't help these younger people. So we need to give the options and then let them choose their leader. I will say though that I have a standing belief, and I say this to my reps: if you're not getting feedback, it's probably because somebody thinks you're not coachable. So I think some of the onus has to be on the sales professional to seek the feedback and not be scared to grow.
Yeah. Alex, what about you? Are you seeing differences with sort of the younger pool of athletes transitioning out? I mean, we had a perfect example with Ash Barty deciding to retire at 25, versus those who are maybe in their mid to late 30s. Are there different expectations as they transition out?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's slightly different expectations with the younger athletes. So look, I work with a lot of student athletes as well. There's a large pool of really competitive university sports now in Australia. Obviously nowhere near like the US model, but I'll work with a lot of student athletes in the US as well. Aussies who go over there, graduate, come back. With a lot of the younger ones, again, I work with a very specific pool of talent and for a specific role. Yeah. Definitely certainty is a big one. But more so with the talent that I work with, they're not really sure what they want to do. Like they have no idea what they want to do long term, and they come from a point of, I need that to be okay with my employer. I might not be here for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I have no idea, but I really like what you guys are about. I want to be part of this culture, and I want to learn
my talents to Qualtrics, but I might not stay for 5 years.
Yeah, like and they want to be honest about it, and they want that to be okay. And I think it's okay as well. And they're young. They're 20, 21, 22, whatever it is. They're not sure what they want to do long term. But so the biggest thing they want to look for is a good culture they can be a part of, but learning and growing. What can I learn here? How can I grow here? How are you guys going to upskill me?
It seems like a fair exchange of value there. Okay, so thank you to the panelists. What I want to do now is I want to throw to the audience, and I'll do the roving mic. Come to you, Steve, first, and just take questions and go as we are.
Hi, well, thank you very much. It was great. Alex, you mentioned trust. Traditionally, the sales profession, certainly in the USA, has been very structured. You've got silo roles, you've got KPIs that are very activity-based, you've got a lot of carrot and stick approaches that are very diametrically opposed to what we've all been talking about, which is soft skills, culture, trust, etc. When Carmen and Alex, particularly, when you're looking at organizations, do you find organizations that are still taking that old-fashioned sales approach and that are still treating salespeople like cattle that should be driven around with a stick?
Not sure I'm going to go that far, but yeah, so it's very hard to change a mindset, and a lot of it comes from the HR models that exist within your organization. So you always have to go back to how you look at how HR is structured and what they're based on. And if you look at a lot of that, it comes down to look at a job description. It says 5 years experience. It says these, tick these points. I think a lot of it comes down to better understanding, and that's why we benchmark the culture. And I say benchmark is probably the wrong term to use, but what is it that's going in? What are we going into? And that's when we start to understand the expectations of the hiring managers. So it's almost as much as our understanding what that organisation is going to when they go into is, and having to reset that expectation that says, your job as a manager is also to mentor. It's not to have someone who looks just like you that's going to do the same things as you, and really trying to get that understanding to change. But it does take quite a big shift in trying to get them to understand that there's not just one way to do these things, but it's a lot of conversations. It's not just a quick fix, to be honest.
I just was reflecting on a sales manager I had once in my career, and he said, Keen, you're not the type of candidate I want for a sales role. And I was like, why? What do you mean? And he goes, I want somebody who's married, divorced, married again, a couple of kids in private school, needs to, hit 100% of their quota just to keep their head above water. Because then I say jump and they say how high? I say jump to you and you say, well, is jumping the thing we should be doing right now? Or maybe, but it was really shocking. I was like, he had this mindset that I'm looking for people whose level of desperation aligns with mine, so that I can, not request, but require them to do things, and they have no option. And yeah, it's kind of scary. Questions? Yes, Steve. Another Steve. There's a table of Steves there.
Table of Steves, yeah. Question for the panel. I guess I moved roles recently, and one of the reasons was I felt like I'd stopped learning. So from a candidate perspective, when you're seeing them actually come into organizations or even through the recruitment process, how kind of top of the kind of requirements is that learning and development kind of opportunity? And I guess, how do you kind of ensure that you're meeting that from an organizational perspective, if that kind of makes sense?
I'm going to jump in, because if you think about what we're doing, we created the experience management category and we're the leader in it. No one's done it. So we can go out and recruit talent from competitors as part of what we do. So business curiosity and a desire to learn are my two top things that we look for for a sales professional in there, because we're kind of building this plane as we're flying it, right? So we're all learning every day. So I ask candidates, what was the last thing you learned? And it is actually quite surprising. Some people have to think about that for a while. And so, you can quite easily delve into, does somebody have a growth mindset, and are they wanting to learn every single day? Because in here, we're all learning every single day. It looks like today we're all doing it remotely, but we are learning every day. So for me, that's right up the top of the list.
Yeah, actually, similarly, a lot of candidates I speak to lately are talking about, I just don't have anything left to learn here. I can't grow, and I'm looking for an organization where I can learn something, especially a lot of shifts between industries. I've seen, like, somebody say from a pharmaceutical sales rep wanting to go into tech, or one industry into another, wanting to learn a whole new piece because they just simply don't have anything left to learn in their current role.
And I think it's one of the big challenges of sales roles. It's, here's your quota, here's your patch, and then maybe we'll move the deck chairs a little bit at the end of the year. But effectively, you're now set in that. That was an issue for me in my career as well. Was, again, not only feeling you're not learning, but feeling you're forgetting stuff that you learned previously because you're not working those muscles on a regular basis. So I think it's a huge concern.
Thanks, Cian. This is a question for the panel. We know there's a war on talent, particularly in sales, right? So the first couple of weeks, that onboarding process and making a really good first impression when the person starts with the company. I'm keen to hear any ideas or any tips, particularly now during COVID, where a lot of interviews are done, you know, through Teams or Zoom, and it's hard to build that kind of emotional connection. So keen to know.
Yeah,
I'll take that first. So yeah, great question. And I also was one of the great resignation people. I left and joined with you with me in October last year. And so
you soaked your mic up a little bit.
So I'd never met my boss until probably just December, I think. But one of the things that we do, and I guess it comes from the military, is trying to get people to be successful early. So how do we give them that ability to achieve something early? We do it through an onboarding process that we call the team hack. So it's literally they get the new people who start get given a project that will affect the company, that will help the company achieve something, and then they're told to literally run at it, sometimes more than once, depending on where we get to, and literally it gets put into action. So they then get to own a success right up front and start to feel as though they've achieved something for the company that they're part of, and it works really well.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Bridget or Alex?
Yeah, so we, I mean, candidate experience is a thing. So we feel that the onboarding starts at the beginning of the interview process. And also too, one of the things that we're focused on is after acceptance, before they even start. What are the events? What are the things that we're doing with that candidate to make them feel connected to the teams they're going to join, the culture of the teams they're going to join before they even get to the starting block? And then absolutely when they're here, how getting them successful quickly. And that's just not outcomes. They can be successfully learning something or just acknowledging that meaningful progression of their success. But I absolutely think the onboarding starts at the application of, or probably even the posting of the job ad.
It's really interesting, the parallels between the recruitment process and the sales process in terms of, you know, first impressions and then right the way through, and then not just going, right, well, you've signed on the line, so we don't have to worry about you now because you're a customer or you're an employee. But now's the time we really have to start investing, because you know, it's almost that buyer's remorse that you get immediately after you've signed. You're like, oh no, is this it? I've got a laptop and a token, and yeah, I think it's a really interesting. Even pre-COVID, that was a huge challenge, but even more so now in the environment where you're not meeting anyone, so you're still sitting in your living room or your second bedroom, going, right, well, okay, what do I do now? So I think it's a huge point of differentiation. Are you seeing anything on your side, Alex?
Yeah, pretty much similar to what you guys said in terms of I've found some of the companies that have onboarded some of our candidates really well, and the feedback has been tremendous. They've been drip feeding them little tasks at a time, not kind of, hey, this whole overall goal. So drip feeding them really achievable tasks that they can do, and it makes them feel like they're winning and they're doing something that part of the success as well. And then obviously just making them feel really welcome and catering to their human side. I mean, everyone does that differently, but yeah, the biggest takeaway is just drip feeding them little tasks.
And then putting your swag picture on LinkedIn to say, this is all the swag I got when I joined.
That's it, yeah.
Any other questions? Gary, did you have a question? So you're nodding there a moment ago at something. I wasn't sure if you had a question. Okay. Sure. Yep.
On what Bridget said, actually, I think you're spot on. That it's the start of the recruitment process, because it may have changed, but not that long ago, you were getting hundreds of people applying for a job, and companies didn't bother to get back to them. It just didn't hear to them, and it's so disrespectful, and it so much hurts the company's brand. So I think the very fact that you're looking at starting the onboarding process when you're looking for the job, and at least getting back to people and telling them what's happening, I think is a big improvement what we've seen in recent years.
I agree. And one of the things I did hope we'd get to today, is it okay if I bring something completely off?
Yes, go off script. Yep.
You know, we've been talking about the sales profession as individual contributors mostly, yet all the things that we're asking of our sales leaders around be inclusive, have a culture of belonging, know your people intimately, understand what they want to do with it. That's why there a lot of people leaders are looking to leave because it's all coming at them.
Yeah.
So we're doing a lot of work around developing the leadership. A huge focus across the region. We have 63 people leaders, and we've got a massive program of work that we're actually leading here in APJ around helping these leaders help their people tap into the play potential of what they do. So as they love coming to work to do what they do, and really focusing on the purpose and the play and the potential in that. And I feel like that kind of hasn't come out yet today in terms of we're just pushing more on the sales leadership, that now they're a counselor, they're a career coach, they're a mentor, and they're driving sales outcomes.
Like back in the day, it was, have you done your QBRs yet? Are you hitting your number? Right, off you go. And I think it's a scary place to be, because also they're expected to have the answers.
And they're under pressure, right? They're dealing with COVID. They're dealing with all this as well. So I'm very mindful of that.
And I think, there's a big distinction between being a sales manager and being a sales leader. And most of them are equipped for the first, but not necessarily for the second, and are feeling quite exposed and quite vulnerable and have all their
overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed. Absolutely. So I think that's a huge topic, and probably one, maybe we'll have another session on that another day. I'm conscious of time today, but I think we're doing all right. Other questions or comments, or have things struck a chord with people today that that you want to expand on or speak to? Steve, yep. All the Steves have now been recognized. So
I'm the third Steve. Hi guys. It's a bit basic question. So you spoke about a lot of positivity, which is great. But if you work for an organization where the culture is not fantastic and you're trying to attract the best talent, have you got any recommendations? I'm not mentioning any names, by the way.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to jump in on that one first, and then we'll throw to the panel. I think, and Bridget alluded to this as well, if you shine a light on something and you recognize there's an issue and then you do nothing about it, that's a problem. But if you hold your hands up and say, look, we think we have a bit of an issue in terms of our culture, and this is our plan, and this is our intent, and this is our stated strategy, or these are our values, and this is where we're moving to, and we want to bring people in who can help us on that journey, and we see you as some, I think that's a more honest conversation. And if I'm not saying have a warts and all conversation with everyone, because obviously, we want them to see us as an attractive organization, but if we don't pretend to be things that we're not, but we do put our hand up and say, this is our aspiration, or this is our goal, maybe then people who are top talent can see that as, okay, I can make a difference here. I'm not just going into a well-oiled machine. I actually have the capacity. I don't think everyone will. Some people will probably shy away from that. I think that's probably in the too hard basket. But if you manage to get some of those people over the line, and then they come in and see just how crap the culture is, and they weren't aware of that, then that's a pretty negative starting point. So I think that there's a challenge there. I'm not really the right person to answer this, but maybe I'll throw it to you, Carmen. You look like you've got.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess, obviously you've got to understand what's driving the culture that makes it less desirable. And I think we've probably all got less desirable experiences we could speak from. But one of the things that I do notice is that we tend to bring people in and then we leave them there. And there's no consideration of, especially when you're trying to build, let's presume it's a good culture, there's no consideration of getting those people upskilled and then looking at internal talent mobility. So where else could they go? Because just because they started as a salesperson, and to Alex's point, if I'm quite young coming in, I kind of remember being young, but it was that, I don't know, I've just got this job because it's kind of good. And the ability to actually have a proper internal talent mobility view of your organization, I think it is really lacking at the moment. So people get stuck in a job, and then it's always we'll recruit from external, but we don't actually ever look at our internal organization and say, these people have the potential to do more. Why don't we get them upskilled? And when those opportunities arise, we will give them the opportunity. And I think a lot of that comes down to hiring externals better, and the focus and the running. And I think that's it also helps a lot with retention and keeping people, and keeping that culture that if it's a good one, obviously it's not a good one, but I think we miss a huge trick on that. And that's where people start to get frustrated because they can't see any other path than what they're doing. And that tends to lead to sort of that culture degradation at times.
Anyone else on that one?
I agree. Yeah, I mean, honesty is the best policy, really. To what you're saying as well. So yeah.
I thought the answer to the question was to send in a sports star to upskill the culture.
100%.
Probably depends on who the sports star is or how bad the culture is.
Can I ask a question? Is that allowed? Being on the panel, I wonder if anyone here, when they're onboarding new team members or even managing sales reps, you have a combination of work from home and in the office. How do you manage that? It's a bit of a selfish question here. I'm trying to learn. But yeah, I find that challenging. Anyone else?
All the research indicates that managing hybrid, which we're all going to have to do now, is going to be a lot more complicated than when everybody was sent home. So it is a challenge for most organisations. What I've found in terms of people coming back into the office, before Omicron in particular, we had a classic bell-shaped curve where people were coming in on a Wednesday. So we actually moved our all-hands equivalent meeting to a Wednesday because we just adjusted for that. But when you'd break out and go into meeting rooms and there'd be a couple of people on Zoom, everyone was so excited about seeing each other again that the poor people on Zoom were like trying to get attention. So I think it's being really mindful of how do you manage in that way. The technology has got to be amazing. It's another thing that sends people away is if the technology they're working with at home isn't equivalent to the office, they'll get fed up, and if they get ignored like that, they'll get fed up. So one of the things we did, we gave everybody $1,000 to try and help them set up their home office environment, and we gave people to get them to encourage them to feel safe. We gave them an opportunity to use Ubers, not trains, and just be mindful. And it changes, right? The perception changes, but if you hold your teams accountable for, are we including everybody, and how are we going to deal with the fact sometimes we're in big meeting rooms and there's a massive camera and the person on Zoom's like, I can't see who's there, because they can't see the people. So that's why we're doing a big and Sarah's not here. Sarah's our employee experience officer. You would have met her on the way in. So she's leading a piece of work around how do we need to improve the technology. We've only moved in 2 years ago, but so much has changed. We're now going to reinvest in a whole bunch of new technology in the meeting rooms, because otherwise the people working remotely are just going to feel disenfranchised.
Well, I mean, today's a perfect example. We're having technical issues, so therefore those who aren't in the room are missing out. And I think there's another layer to this as well, which is all of our customer interactions, because not only have they moved online in the last 12, 24 months, but customers seem to prefer that in many ways. So if that takes less of their time and you can have a good interaction with them, great. But if it's a crap interaction because of the tech or because of something else, and we've seen lots of organizations that have been, then we lose a huge amount, not only of opportunity, but of that perceived professionalism, and you just can't get your act together and those kind of things. And that has a material impact on a sales cycle, just like it does on a recruiting process or anything else.
And what I've also found is, we all know this, right? We would love being on site with our customers because it's the corridor conversation before and after the meeting where the real insight happens.
Yes, absolutely.
And what I've found is it's starting to come back, and we're trying to catch it where the meeting finishes and then it continues with the people in the room. Even if it's just them leaving the room, having the last thought bubble, or the 5 people that just logged off and already on their next Zoom have missed out on that. Yeah. So we're trying to get rituals inside our business of holding ourselves accountable for stopping us when that happens and making sure we feel it.
Yeah. That's great. John, did that question come through online? It didn't. Okay. Well, look, I am conscious of time. Are there any final questions in the room? So look, yes, Gunnar. So this will be the last question for the day.
A very quick one. So just in terms of observation, as we also in sales and in marketing, so we have this funnel. We put 1,000 customers or prospects in and get few customers out, and everything else is left out. I have the feeling that in a talent point of view, it's the same kind of thing. So we get 1,000 who apply for this, but how do we really work with them? So shouldn't we get into kind of a flywheel approach, candidate in the middle? And when it's not the right moment, the right space at this current day, maybe we can still nurture this person who could have been nearly mated, but didn't, so that then when the time is right, that we can work with them. With the fluctuation that we see, unfortunately, also in the talent teams and HR, I don't see this happen, which is a pity. So what's your view?
All right. Yeah, that's a great question, because sometimes we think with a customer, you didn't buy from us this time, so you're dead to us. Or we think we didn't hire you, or you didn't pick us, so you're dead to us. But actually that concept of taking the longer term view and nurturing those people who've come into our pool.
I think that's the candidate experience again, right? So we need to nurture that talent pool, but they may not be right. But if they don't have a great experience, they're going to tell 20 people, I wouldn't even bother with that organization. So they may not be right, but somebody they know may be. So there's many reasons to nurture the talent as they come through as candidates.
Yes, I love it. Okay, I think we do have that question online. So the final question, because it's one that crops up all the time, that the perception of sales hasn't come up as a conversation because there is a negative perception, or certainly there has been a negative perception of sales as an industry. Now, I did an exercise not that long ago where I looked at every business card over 20 years, and not one of them had the word sales on it, even though I was either a quota carrier or a sales manager. And I sense that that perception is shifting as the balance of power is shifted to customers, as it's easier to find out people if they're doing the wrong thing in a sales context. But we're definitely not there yet. I think a lot of people still don't feel comfortable calling themselves in inverted commas a salesperson. Do you have any thoughts?
I'll go first because I'm quite passionate about this one. I have this conversation daily, especially with athletes talking about careers after sport. Such negative connotations towards sales. I don't want to be the person calling people when they're eating dinner, trying to tell them to change my phone plan, or that's not what sales is about. So I try and coach people that sales is actually about listening as opposed to speaking and solving a problem. I think that's what salespeople are.
And earning the right to move to the next step, not worrying about the sale, because that takes care of itself if you do the right thing on the way through. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, folks, I think we might wrap it up there because I'm conscious of everyone. We're approaching 10. What I'd like to say is a huge thank you to our panelists, to Carmen, to Bridget, to Alex, and you'll hopefully all join me in thanking them for their input today, and to all of you for making the trip out of your home office or your bedroom into the real world, which is a scary thing for us all to do still, particularly on a Friday when often it's a challenge. Like, hopefully we will get to come back and do this more frequently, and hopefully we'll have a few more bums on seats next time around. I think it's really important, to your point, Bridget, that we invest in sales leaders, both from a skill set perspective, but also from a networking, just those, corridor conversations, because you don't get to have those very often. And sometimes you don't necessarily want to have them with your own colleagues because there's areas of vulnerability or things that you don't know that you want to talk with other people. So that's one of the key reasons for this forum, to give you the chance to do that and have that networking. So, and for our extra secret panelists, for Dr. Cecilia, thank you as well. And to John Smybert and the team for all the work and the effort that goes on behind the scenes to put it on. Just huge round of applause and thanks.
That's great.
The new page-turning sales novel, The Wentworth Prospect. In the words of one reviewer, it's B2B sales mastery delivered in an ingenious, engaging, and hugely entertaining way. Get it now at your favorite book retailer.